welcome back to another episode of Film Facts Stats. We are a notch above your group chat. I'm Jack Coyle, and I'm joined by my co-host Mason Wood, football editor for Back Sports Page, as well as a contributor to Shy City Sports. Mason, how are we doing today, buddy?
I am doing good. Plenty of playoff football this weekend. And, I mean, as much as I'm happy to see the Cowboys lost, I am really pissed to see the Packers won. We got plenty to get into today. I'm excited.
Yes, we do. We also have Freddy Freeman with us, our other co-host. Freddy is a professional handicapper, a film aficionado, and our resident NFL expert. Freddy, what are we going to be getting into today?
Man, I'm going to rail on some of these games that we watched this past weekend and just tear apart the NFL and ESPN and everything of the sort. And they might be merging. We could actually mention that a little bit as well in passing. And then we're going to look at these next week of games, this divisional round of football.
Absolutely. Looking forward to some of that playoff discussion. So if you've never seen the show, this is a football podcast brought to you by Back Sports Page. We cover both the college and the NFL. I cover college, Freddie covers the NFL, and Mason does a little bit of everything. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with the NFL this week.
Oh boy. Okay, so I am very excited to rail on ESPN, and it's going to start with the Texans and Browns game. Now they are content, ESPN is, with being the moniker to CJ Stroud's Bill, if you catch my drift. They are just saying how great of a game he had, and just, this young guy is the future of the NFL. And I'm not attacking CJ Stroud. I love CJ Stroud. We've been through that. He had a good game. He did his job. But what we saw from the Browns was 2 pick sixes. We saw Ronnie Hickman with the worst safety play in maybe NFL playoff history. This guy gave up at least 10 points conservatively, maybe 17, maybe even in the 20s. Okay, just being out of position in coverage on his own, so covering deep parts of the field and coming up to make tackles, being out of position. Ronnie Hickman had a horrible game at safety for the Browns. Grant Delpit was, in fact, out. He was questionable that week leading into the game. Grant Delpit out. Ronnie Hickman had a horrible game. So people are sitting here talking about CJ Stroud and how good of a game he had. No. He had, well, that's actually correct. He had a good game, but don't sit there and call his game great, because he didn't. He was sub 300 yards. He didn't even really get pulled, and they put up 45 because their defense scored twice, and Ronnie Hickman did a horrible job in coverage and coming up to make the tackles. So that's my thoughts on that. Everything that we saw on the field and how the media is responding to it. Mason, what did you get from that game?
I mean, it's not more so what I got at the game, but I have to say, man, one of my favorite sayings in the world is don't poke the bear with your pecker, but I like to poke the bear with my pecker. And Freddie, I think you're just I think I'm sensing some anger about last week about his Browns prediction, and now he's deep in the water right now because the Browns are gone. And that's okay. It was a rough game overall, guys, for the Browns, and I think that man, I said it last week. I think the Texans were going to be the story of this, but I think that, to Freddie's point, I think that there's a lot of people that are banking on CJ Stroud's performance, and the man only had 16 completions. However, that being said, he is a rookie, so it's going to be exciting to see where this goes. We're going to have to see where he is next week. I think the important thing to remember for the Browns is, with the amount of injuries that they had, they really weren't even supposed to be here in a sense. So the fact that they got here in the first place is an achievement in itself. It was still a very successful season for the Cleveland Browns, but to watch the Texans beat you, and now they have it's funny that now the Texans have the better pick because they beat the Browns. I think that whole thing is interesting, but yeah, it quite an interesting game this weekend for sure. Freddie, I'll throw it back over to you.
Well, before moving on, I have to say, it's not just that I'm mad about the Browns pick, but I'm mad about how people respond to it, because one of the reasons why I'm interested in even creating this podcast with you guys and building this is because I hate how the media responds to things and tries to build storylines out of nothing. You talked about the 16 completions, sub 300 yards. Yes, he did his job. He found guys who had broken coverages around them. Guys took dump offs to the house. We saw all that, but I just hate when the media does that. So I'm a little bit pissed at the Browns, and I'm pissed at myself for trusting Kevin Stefanski. He's one of the coaches that I trust the least. I've argued for him being fired throughout this season. But anyway, Jack, your thoughts before moving on to our next game.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you make a good point that really the Browns kind of did beat themselves in that game. But that being said, I've got to say the Texans beat the team in front of them. They came. CJ Stroud did have a good game. Like you said, I wouldn't necessarily crown him the second coming or anything like that. But it was a good game. He got the job done, and he got a playoff win as a rookie. So I'm not going to take anything away from the guy. I'm going to give him his flowers. I agree. Like you said, I agree he's not necessarily the second coming or anything like that. But you know what? Playoff win as a rookie. He got the job done. I think he deserves his flowers.
Okay. Fair enough. As long as it's a small bouquet, then we're on the same page.
I like that. All right.
Okay. Moving on to Dolphins Chiefs. Now, I have never seen a team want to play football less than the Dolphins, and I have to, eat my own words, and hats off to you guys for calling this. You said Miami is going to want to stay in Miami with their Instagram models and do their thing, and are not going to be totally disinterested in playing this football game in the cold weather. And you were right. I was wrong. I should never have assumed that they were actually professional football players. They did not want to tackle. The coaches got away from what they needed to do. They didn't open, so their offense just became totally stagnant after the first couple of drives. And it's not like the Chiefs play good football. Mahomes missed throws. Now it's cold. I'm not going to attack him for that. We also saw a ton of drops. Travis Kelce should not be having any drops. I don't care what the weather is. The Chiefs didn't play good football. The Dolphins just didn't want to play. So you guys have nailed that on the head. I was wrong. I got to say that. Mason, what were your thoughts on that game?
I think it kind of went kind of how I wanted or how I expected it to, not how I wanted it to. I was hoping the Dolphins would be more competitive, but I think it was a tall task to ask the Dolphins to go in and beat a team above 500, considering they haven't done it all year. I mean, what a tall task for the Dolphins, who are 11-6 going in, to go and do it in that weather. It's a tall task. So they definitely didn't get it done, and yeah, none of those guys really wanted to do it. And I think the biggest thing is that they never got their run game going. Devon Achane 1.5 yards on average on 6 carries for 9 yards, and then Raheem Mostert 8 carries for 33 yards. Tua had to throw it 39 times, and I think that they just didn't get their running game established like they wanted to. The Chiefs did a fantastic job up the middle of stopping the run against one of the best run offenses in the NFL this year. So it was a good job by the Chiefs to be able to stop the run, and really that stopped the entire offense there for the Dolphins. So definitely a rough way to end the season, and a lot of questions there in Miami for sure.
Jack, what about you? What do you have on this?
I think you hit the nail on the head, Freddie, when you said that you have never seen a team want to play football less than the Miami Dolphins did against the Kansas City Chiefs this weekend. That was embarrassing, man. Embarrassing. You could tell by their body language that no one wanted to be on the field. And granted, listen, I'm not saying that I want to necessarily be out there when it feels like negative 30 with the wind chill and everything. I get that that's a nightmare to play in, but like you said, when you get paid millions of fucking dollars a year, you have to go play the damn game. And it calls into question, I think, a lot of things. I think, honestly, I've heard some talking heads start to question if Tua's the guy now, because they've had him for 3 to 4 years and he can't get the job done with the weapons that he has on offense and the best play caller in the NFL. So, it raises a lot of questions for the Dolphins. I think they need to do some hard soul searching in the offseason, but that was embarrassing out of a professional sports program, man.
100%. And Mike McDaniel is definitely in the conversation for top play call in the NFL. And I can get behind Tua not being the guy. I mean, he threw a bunch of multiple interceptions in a bunch of games this year would be the correct way to say that. He gets so addicted to fitting the ball into tight windows that he doesn't know the difference between a good decision and a bad decision. And so he turns the ball over. And that's not what you want out of your guy. And especially with this system, you need to hit tight windows, but the progressions are right next to each other. So it should be so easy for you to just go through those and make the right call and then hit the check down if it's not there. So Tua is definitely, there's some questions around that. Moving on to the Packers and Cowboys. Now, this is an interesting one. I maybe misspoke when we went into this game. I did not say the Cowboys would for sure win, so I didn't misspeak in that sense, but I spoke of Jalen Reed out of the slot. And what I really should have said is just the slot. The Cowboys did not cover the slot well. Their linebackers did I don't know what word I was going for there, but it did not come out. Did a horrible job against the run and just the second level of that defense. So Dan Quinn was able to materialize a competent defense for most of the year. He had a couple games throughout the year where he failed, but he failed here with very minimal talent available to him. And then Mike McCarthy, I'm not even going to attack him so much. Dak had one of the worst games that we've seen from Dak. Like, he was less accurate than he normally is. He's not making great decisions. He was missing guys. So look, the Packers didn't belong in the playoffs in the first place. And the fact that they won, it just goes to show how bad this season is. There's so little difference. There's such a small difference between the teams that deserve to be in the playoffs and the teams that didn't. And this was just, everyone just fell apart. And again, I hate the media for making this thing about Jordan Love. No, he was also just like hitting guys against completely busted coverages. It wasn't like he balled out. He did a good job. He did his job. He was competent. And I'm not attacking him or CJ Stroud, but to sit here and turn this into a story that it's not, I hate that. Jordan Love was competent, but the Cowboys defense fell apart. Their offense fell apart. These things compounded and the game just got away from them. So this was just ugly football that I am not happy about. And we could talk a little bit more about that after we finish this recap. But Mason, what were your thoughts on the Packers-Cowboys game?
Well, as a Bears fan, I think it is blasphemy that the Packers are moving on and that Jordan Love looked the way he did and is now being talked about the way he is in the media. It's very upsetting as a Bears fan. But as a media member, I feel that the Cowboys did what the Cowboys do best, and they choked when it chokes, when it's the best time to choke. And I feel like it's one of those things where I talked to my dad about this, right? Where I feel like certain teams cannot see other teams in the playoffs. Otherwise, it's game over. It don't matter. And so, like, for the Cowboys, that happens to be the Packers and the 49ers. Like, they cannot see those teams in the playoffs. Otherwise, it's over. That's just the way it works. And so, like, I don't think the Cowboys are going to be able to win a Super Bowl. Like, I don't think the roster matters. I don't think the coach matters. I think the Cowboys aren't going to be able to win a Super Bowl until they don't have to see the Packers or the 49ers. I think it's some bad juju with them or something. But, like, there is something strange about the fact that the Cowboys could not lose at home all year and had one of the better defenses all year and then imploded in front of their home crowd against the Packers, who just so happen to be having the best football, playing the best football of their season. I mean, they're really hot right now, but at the same time, this should not have happened to the Cowboys. This is weird. It shouldn't have happened, but it just so happens that it's the curse of the Cowboys versus Packers or the Cowboys versus 49ers. So until they don't have to match up with either of those teams in any of these playoff rounds, the Cowboys will, be on their couches mid-January every single year. That's the way it's going to work.
That's definitely – I like the way you sort of metaed that. You brought us out of the nitty-gritty. You're just like, look, these franchises have their history, and I think that's definitely – I think there's something to that where Aaron Rodgers will always own the Bears. Even long after we're all gone, Aaron Rodgers will always have owned the Bears and will always own the Bears. But anyway.
Yeah, you just had to put that in there, huh?
I just realized I said that to two Bears fans. Jeff, what did you see in Packers?
I would love to argue with that, but I can't. He's beaten us, it was like 18 years in a row. Anyway, but back to the Packers-Cowboys. Now, this was a really interesting game for me because I've seen this phenomenon a couple times in sports. I thought it was very clear that the Cowboys walked in there expecting to win. And when the Packers gave them some resistance, they fell apart. They didn't know how to fight back. It was like, I had said on last episode's podcast that the Cowboys shouldn't have an issue getting through the Packers, and I still agree with that. They should not have. That shouldn't have been a game. With the talent they have, the roster, it should have been an easy win for the Cowboys, but they showed up expecting that, and you can't have that attitude in the NFL. As soon as the Packers came out and hit them in the face, they fell immediately apart, and it was 27-0 at halftime, and really – we didn't have a game for the second half. Dak had one of the worst games I've seen from a quarterback this year, and it's playoff Dak in full effect. Now, he made a really interesting comment on Monday where he said, if Mike McCarthy is on the hot seat, then so should I be. Okay, yeah, 100%. I mean, I don't necessarily recommend talking yourself out of a job, but you're 100% right. If Mike McCarthy's on the hot seat, then you should be too, Dak. So, I mean, I know that's obviously not what he meant, but he's damn right. I think it's time that they need to have some really hard discussions in Dallas because that is unacceptable.
I think that's correct. I think that's a great point. But I'm hesitant to fire Mike McCarthy, not because I'm a fan of him or I think he's a good coach. I think right now we're seeing a race to the bottom. in the NFL. We're seeing a lot of talent retire, and we're not seeing enough talent come in at the coaching position or at other positions, frankly, and rules aren't helping that. Like Kareem Jackson is an example of a safety who got suspended pretty much out of her starting job. And that's ridiculous because he was actually playing good football. But now you just can't play good football anymore. So many rules are coming into play, but they're just limiting the game so that you can't even do a good job anymore. So we're seeing a limit of competence on the field. We're seeing decreasing competence at coaching positions. And so they should both be on the hot seat, but are you really going to go up if you move on from them? Probably not. I don't think Trey Lance is the answer, at least not yet. Maybe if you have a quarterback whisperer and you want to commit to a full rebuild, sure, but I don't know where they could go. Like, I don't think they're going to go up, but we could set aside the coaching conversation for another point in time. Moving on to the Lions and Rams game.
Can I add something real quick?
Go ahead. Yep.
I just want to say the perfect way to recap the way that this Packers-Cowboys game went down is it's like when you're at school and the big bully, the one that bullies everybody, finally someone stands up to them, punches them in the mouth, and rather than fight back and be the tough guy that bully is, the bully runs away crying like a little, I'm not even going to say it. You get the point. That was the equivalent of this game. The Packers were the person standing up to the bully, and unfortunately, the Cowboys were the bully that ran away crying to their mommy. And that's what happened in this game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well put, Mason.
Well put indeed. Lions-Rams, the best game of the week. And I don't even think it was a particularly good game. The Lions have so much talent that just keeps falling apart. And the Rams have great coaching. This is what we spoke about before. Have great coaching and just a couple of key players. They could have won that game easily. Stafford missed Nakua. On the Rams' last drive, he missed Nakua for a first down, possibly a touchdown, but the first down would have put them in a better position to keep running the ball, kick a field goal with minimal time left or no time left. So, like, the Rams didn't convincingly win that game, and we all thought it was going to be close. But, like, they really could have lost to the Rams, who don't have a great secondary. And it's because the Lions secondary did not do a good job. The linebackers didn't do a good job. They just fall apart. And we're going to talk about Bucs-Eagles and next week a little bit. But this game was just not pretty. Just because it was a good game doesn't mean it was a pretty game and doesn't mean that either team played good football. Mason, what did you pull from this game?
No, I definitely agree with you. I think that there was, that element of it wasn't the best football. I think that we expected more out of the two rushing offenses, and we got more passing offense more than anything. I think more than anything, this game it's a big win for Detroit because especially with the loss for Dallas, they now get another playoff game. And that stadium right now is got to be one of the toughest places to play with how loud it is in there and everything. And they showed it off the other night. And so I think that with that, with the combination of the fans and having that opportunity to play in front of them again, and like I think that the Lions kind of this weekend, I know that they struggled in the second half, but I feel like the way they came out, the way they started, and the fact that they were able to finish the way they did in a close game like this, even though they lost a close game a few weeks ago, I think this takes away some of that pain. They're able to advance. And I think more than anything, I think the Lions got their mojo back, and I think that they're going to be dangerous once again like they were earlier in the season. Now, do I think that they're going to beat the 49ers? No. But do I think that they're going to beat the Buccaneers? Yes. So they are going to be an NFC championship team. It just depends on, how things work out. But I like this win for the Lions. I wish that they could have had more in the second half, but ultimately the scriptwriters had this written in as a close game, so there was no chance for them to score more points because the Lions needed to catch up. Or the Rams needed to catch up. So with the way the script worked out, this is the way things worked out. The Lions win 24-23. I'm more than happy with it. I'm a big Lions fan. And if I had my choice of who I want to win the Super Bowl, as a Bears fan, I'm picking the Lions, unfortunately.
Well, that's an interesting pick from a Bears fan, and I'm definitely excited to talk more about Lions, Bucks in the next segment. But, Jack, what did you pull from this game?
Yeah, I want to echo a little bit of what Mason said about it being one of the loudest places to play. The Rams had to burn 2 of those timeouts in the last drive just because of that crowd noise. So I really think that that's something that we can't overstate. How important it is to have one of those home games in the wild card can mean so much because, like Freddy said, those teams were really close. And if Stafford completes that pass, it's a completely different game. And so, for me, I was impressed with the Lions offense. I liked what they got done. It was a really tight game. I wouldn't have been shocked if LA would have pulled that one out, but I don't know how I'm looking next week for between the Bucks and the Lions. I actually echo your feelings, Mason. I would love it if the Lions won it all, just because I think that city freaking deserves it. They have had one of the toughest goes out of any fan bases, and so I hope they at least get an NFC Championship out of this. But I don't know, man. I'm not going to touch that Bucks game next week because I think it might just be a little bit too close for comfort for me. But want to congratulate the Lions, first playoff win in 20 some years. So congratulations to them. And, I hope they do win the next game. I don't think I don't know if it'll happen though. We'll see.
The Lions are the only thing that give me hope as a Bears fan. They're the only thing, like everything that Mike Tirico had to mention about them, I was just like, yeah, you keep telling me about that, Mike. This is going to be me one day with the Bears. I'm going to be crying after the game when we finally win a playoff game when I'm 30. It's going to be great.
We'll see.
I'm 22 now, by the way, so that would be 2032, the next playoff win. I'm predicting it here on the show.
3 different quarterback attempts.
It has to be before then. I can't support this franchise for another 10 years without a playoff win. I don't think I can.
Well, look, I think getting into a little bit of Bears talk, I don't think this front office can do. The management, I don't know what the ownership, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know. Their coaching decisions are highly questionable. Their draft decisions are questionable. I don't know what's going on there, but it's not good. The new GM's doing a good job, but we'll see what happens.
How you gonna look at Bill Belichick and how you gonna look at Jim Harbaugh and see that they're available and Mike Vrabel and see that they're available on the market and go, Matt Eberflus is our guy? Like what are we doing?
All right,
anyway,
so
we're getting into Bears. Let's move on.
Let's tack on.
Yeah, no, we don't want to do this right now.
Let's tack on a little bit of a coaching segment of a random NFL segment at the end. Actually, let's do that. Then we'll come back to the Bears. We'll come back. There's a couple things I want to mention, but right now let's move on to Bills Steelers. And biggest takeaway: look, the Steelers, another team, didn't belong here. The Bills didn't open up Josh Allen at all. They played very safe, limiting football, and I think it's going to be extremely interesting. Bills Chiefs, we're going to see a lot of ugliness. It's going to be interesting. You know what? Let me table that for when we get into that segment. But Bills Steelers was not pretty. It wasn't convincing, not nearly as convincing as it should have been. And I don't know. This is just another game. We're not seeing good football, and the NFL is just ruining themselves right now. But Mason, what did you pull from this game?
Nothing. This game went exactly how I planned it to. My girlfriend's family is a bunch of Steelers fans, and the game was actually supposed to be on Sunday before. And she texted me. She's like, "Hey, we're all going out for the game. Up to like a sports bar. Would you love to go?" And I was like, I immediately responded, "Yes, I would love to watch the Steelers lose with you guys." So, like, this went exactly how I think everybody anticipated it was going to go, and the Steelers never really had a chance. Congratulations on making the playoffs and possibly keeping Mike Tomlin around for one more year. That's great, and keeping your above 500 streak alive. But congratulations on another playoff loss as well. And the Bills, they were very lucky. They had it easy. I think that this would have been a much tougher game had they have had to see the Dolphins again. They would have had a much tougher game. And again, it's just games like this where it's just flipping a switch for some of these teams, and this may have been enough of an opportunity for the Bills to have gained enough of their mojo back to go down and take down the Chiefs. We'll have to see. We'll get to that later.
Jack, what about you?
No, you guys pretty much hit the nail on the head. I think the biggest thing was that the Steelers never deserved to be in the playoffs. They it was – if you look back at their past games throughout the season, at no point did I think that they were going to be really a playoff contender. A lot of those games were super close. It was – they really just didn't deserve to be there. I think, like I said last week, I think Bills and Chiefs is going to come down to a field goal. I would love it if the Bills won. I'm so freaking sick of seeing the Chiefs. But, really, I think that game could go either way. So I'm looking forward to that one, but I think it's going to be a close one. It's going to come down to a field goal. So
Jack, jumping the gun a little bit here, but yeah, definitely. I mean, I was interesting because start of the season, Steelers roster wise, I was like, they got a good shot at even just the division. but massive coaching issues there, and
Yeah.
just players not living up to their potential. A lot of blame to go around there. Moving on to the last game of this segment, and then we'll move on to next week of football, and then the random points we all want to make around the league. Bucks Eagles. Holy crap. Look, the Eagles have not been playing good football all year, even when they were winning. And then it got worse and they were losing. And they just weren't winning in the trenches. Jalen Hurts most of the year was doing a lot of one read stuff. And so just not getting through progressions, not doing his thing. And the Bucks came in and Todd Bowles said, look, I'm actually a good coach. Sirianni, you lost a lot of supporting staff. You're kind of trash right now. I'm actually a good coach. Baker Mayfield had such a good game. We saw multiple drops from Mike Evans. Didn't matter. Other receivers stepped up, made plays. They were able to move the ball. Both teams got some movement on the defensive side of the trenches there, but the Bucks just won field position and they scored. And oh my God, dude, I'm excited to talk about Bucks Lions. But we just saw this is the difference of a good coach. We saw a good coach with a roster that's like half as good as the other team, but the other team just didn't have the coaching, didn't have the confidence in themselves from the coaching staff, and then down to just what they've put on film this year. So it was just more ugly football. And that's really sums up the entire season and all the playoffs so far. Mason, what did you pull from Eagles Bucks?
Well, I think you hit a lot of good points. I think that the whole Nick Sirianni getting fired talk it's not going to happen. I think that the way that this season went for the Eagles, it's now, no, we're not counting the season prior. We're just talking about this one single season. It is very similar to what the Cardinals did a few years ago, where they started 11-0 and then tanked, lost in the first round of the playoffs when they shouldn't have. This feels similar to that, right? You got a young quarterback, you got a young coach, right? This feels very similar. They're probably going to come back next year, and they're probably going to be mid, and a lot of it's going to be choked up to at some point during this season. They lost their mojo, and they never earned it back. They had lots of opportunities to gain their crap back, and they never did. And that's why they went in and they got blown out by the Buccaneers at home, who performed well. Baker Mayfield performed well in all their, they have one of the best receiving cores in the NFL, undoubtedly. And I mean, their leading receiver wasn't even a receiver. Their leading receiver was Cade Otton. So I like the Buccaneers. I do. I think they're a really good team. I think that they can go as far as Baker Mayfield takes them. But the Eagles, man, just they suck and they folded. What can you say? Jack, what do you think?
Yeah, man. I mean, that was a historic fall apart. I don't know when the last time that a team started 10-1, finished 1-6. And it's unacceptable for any team, but it's particularly unacceptable with that roster. That is coaching malpractice by Nick Sirianni to not have success with that roster. Okay. Another thing to mention, James Bradbury might need to be investigated because he missed more important tackles than I think like any other player I've seen in a really long time. That was really, really bad defense. Also, they made zero adjustment to the Buccaneers blitzing on third down and just were never able to really pick that up and take it on. It was almost like a high school offense. They were just unable to really like adjust to that blitz. And it's something that like a coach should have seen their entire career. Yeah, they're going to blitz on third down. Just never made any adjustments. So, man, Mason, I think you're probably right. I don't think they're going to get rid of Sirianni necessarily, but they need to. I think they should because that is just unacceptable. Again, you can't have the talent that you have on that roster and finish like that. It was just a really terrible performance. And again, the lack of adjustments to what Tampa Bay was showing is, again, unacceptable.
Well, and I'll say this too, this game, it's 32-9, but it wasn't a total blowout. I mean, the Bucks, the Eagles were involved for a good portion of this game. I'd like to point out that Hurts was 25 for 35, 250 and a touchdown. There are quarterbacks that can win in the playoffs with that stat line. Where did they lack? 10 carries for 34 yards out of DeAndre Swift at 3.4 yards a carry, 1 for 5 out of Hurts, and 4 for 3 out of Gainwell. They couldn't run the ball for shit. And that was where, I think a lot of the problem lied. Their offense is meant to run the football, and they couldn't do the one thing that they're good at. I mean, it was inevitable they were going to lose this game. And they're playing against a really good Tampa run defense. I love the defensive line for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm a big Vita Vea supporter. So, like, he's my favorite defensive tackle in football. They showed up when it mattered most, and it showed that very easily. The Eagles, if you stop their run game, you stop them. That's how it works.
Well, on top of that, I just want to tack on to cap off this segment. I mean, James Bradbury didn't have as bad of a game as Ronnie Hickman. I have to come back to that. Ronnie Hickman had the worst game I've ever seen out of any player in the NFL at any position. It was horrendous. I recommend going back, watching the All-22 on that. I could get lost in how bad that film was. But Bradbury was absolutely awful. And Mason, that's a great point. Like, Jalen Hurts, look, I'm not protecting his film, but a lot of people love to just look at stats and create storylines out of just stats. And if you're going to do that, then you have to put Jalen Hurts right there with CJ Stroud and Jordan Love. So not that you should based off of film, but that's a great point. That wraps up the Super Wildcard Weekend recap. And now let's move into, Mason, your segment of this coming slate of games.
Absolutely. We got a lot of games to preview. We're going to be kicking it off with the Texans versus the Ravens. Now, I was very high on the Texans last week. I said that the Texans are going to be the story of the playoffs, and I think that they are becoming that. However, this is where that ends. The Ravens are going to come in, and this is the Saturday game, and I think the only thing that plays into the advantage of the Texans, there's two things. You got one, momentum, and two, the fact that the Texans got put at their normal Saturday time slot. The fact that they're in that normal Saturday time slot means they have a chance. You put them at the Saturday night time slot or the Sunday afternoon time slot, they would have lost this game easily. But because they're in their, normal Texans playoff time slot, I have a lot of faith in them. But I think they're going against one of the best teams in the NFL, one of the most rounded teams, well-rounded teams in the NFL. So I think that the Ravens are going to win this game. However, the Texans are going to play it close. It's going to be a close game until the end, but I think that this is easily going to be a Ravens victory. Now, I think the line is set at 6.5. I actually really like the plus 6.5 for the Texans. I think this game ends up being about a 32-29 game. I think the Texans are in it till the end. They show a lot of promise in the end, but I think that the Ravens are going to finish it off. And I know that there's probably people that are like, well, the Ravens blew out the 49ers and they blew out the Seahawks. You really don't think they're going to, do you really think it's going to be a competitive game against the Texans? Yes, I do. The Ravens have had a week off. They are look, the last time the Ravens had a week off, it went very poorly. Okay. I'm just saying they're not going to come out and they're not going to kick butt, and it's not going to be a 38-3 game. This is going to be a 32-27, 32-29 game. It's going to be close until the end. But yes, the Ravens are going to take care of it. Freddie, what are your thoughts on the Texans-Ravens game?
So many. So actually, the Ravens have had 2 weeks off because they took week 18 off in a lot of ways, not totally, but so they've had 2 weeks off. And I want to point something out. I was railing on Ronnie Hickman, safety for the Browns, backup safety for the Browns. And here's the thing. Marcus Williams, a lot of people forget he was the perpetrator, victim, unknown storyline of the Minneapolis Miracle. So I don't know. That's safety for the Browns, safety for the Ravens. Let's see what happens. Now, Denard Smith, has done a tremendous job coming over from the Eagles to the Ravens, which, side point, I'll just put it in here, Mike McDonald, maybe not ready for a head coaching position because we see what Denard Smith, what kind of difference that makes for secondaries. But anyway, Marcus Williams, maybe interesting storyline to track there at the safety position. The Ravens should come in here and just blow through the Texans. I don't think it should not be close. It shouldn't be close. The Texans should have put up, if the Browns played clean football, it should have been like 17 or 20 points. And that's not bad, but the Ravens have a defense with similar capacity, even though the Browns didn't reach that capacity in that game. The Ravens have a great shot of reaching that capacity of holding the Texans to 17 or 20 points. And they've been playing the most consistent football of any team around the NFL. So not that they're playing lights out, but they're playing consistent ball, and consistency, ask any successful person, consistency is key. So I have the Ravens winning this game. I don't know if it's all that close, although I do think the Texans scored a decent amount of points, but that's what I have out of this game. Jack, what about you?
Yeah, I need my Ravens to come through, man. I want that freaking future to pay out. But no, I don't think that it will. I don't know. It could go either way. I'm not going to touch this game for betting because I wouldn't be surprised either way of what happens. I think the Ravens should take care of them, but we've seen drastically different Ravens teams depending on the game throughout this year, particularly their receiver play. For whatever reason, they have these certain games where they just it's like they catch a case of the drops or something. And they all of a sudden there's like 4 or 5 drops out on the field. So, yeah, I think it really depends on who shows up. I would love it if the Ravens win, but I'm not touching this one.
Fair
Now,
enough.
to your point, the Ravens did beat the Texans back on September 10th, 25-9. C.J. Stroud was 28 of 44 for 242 yards. Lamar Jackson, not a great stat. I didn't watch this game, but not a great stat line when you look at it. He was 17 for 22 for $169 and an interception. So we'll have to see, but it looks like I'm on the sole alone train for the Texans are going to make it close and give me that Texans plus 6.5. But it's going to be a good game nonetheless, I hope. And the Ravens are definitely moving on. Next up, we've got the Packers and the 49ers. Now, this matchup is one of those where, I talked about it earlier. The Cowboys can't meet up with the Packers and they can't meet up with the 49ers in the playoffs. Well, the Packers can't meet up with the 49ers either. I think the 49ers have their number. I think this is one of those times where, again, I think this game will be closer than people are expecting because of the fact that the 49ers have had some time off. That is going to play a factor into this. I don't think that should be discounted at all. I think it plays a factor into these games when teams get the bye week. As much as they're a little bit healthier, they're a little bit rustier as well. So that's going to play a difference. And I think that Packers plus 9.5. Are you kidding? Are you kidding? At the least, they're going to lose by 7. But I like the line. I mean, they're not. It's not going to be a super close game. It's not going to be a 3-point game. But the Packers are going to be involved. It's going to be a one-score game. It's probably going to be a 7-point game. You're looking at a 28-21, 24-17 sort of game. So that plus 9.5 is a little bit inflated, in my opinion. I would take the Packers plus 9.5. I think they've got the momentum. You're going against a 49ers team that hasn't, has taken a little bit of time off. I think the 49ers are going to be more than well prepared, but similar to this Texans-Ravens team, you're playing against a team with a lot of momentum, with a young quarterback that could be, solid in this moment. A lot of it's going to come down to how well Jordan Love plays, but the Packers are going to be in this till the end. But once again, the 49ers, the 1 seed, are still going to end up with the victory either way. Freddie, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, again, I can't go to this game being close, but I can't trust the 49ers either. The 49ers are the only team in the NFL that gives the Eagles a run for their money in terms of talent on the roster. But we've seen so many dud games that it's impossible to trust any team, including the Niners. And what Brock Purdy are we going to see? Brock Purdy, if he protects the ball and hits the right guys, again, they also have a fairly simple progression for their quarterback in that offense, and they run the ball a good amount. McCaffrey's healthy. He's all good. We're going to see Debo out of the backfield a little bit. The 49ers could easily put up 40 and hold the Packers to 3, talent-wise. Is that going to happen? Who freaking knows, dude? And I'm not saying this in terms of that makes the NFL interesting. I think this is only just because we might see really bad football. It's not like who knows. These are 2 good teams dueling it out. No. One team clearly should be able to outplay the other, but we have no knowledge, no history to rely on to say, yes, this team that's better by far is actually going to do their job and play good football. So this is a very interesting game to watch. It shouldn't be close, but I could 100% see it being close.
Absolutely. Jack, your thoughts?
That last line, 100%. It shouldn't be close, but it absolutely could be, which is kind of exactly what I said about last week about the Cowboys-Packers. The Cowboys should not have it shouldn't have even been a game for them. They should have easily ran through them, and then we watched what happened. So I'm hesitant to make a pick on this as well. I actually love your pick, Mason, the plus 9.5. I think that is a good pick, but I'm not touching this one because I don't know who's going to show up. So, it completely depends on what San Francisco team shows up. For me, the biggest story out of this game is how crazy is it that we're having a playoff game between Jordan Love and Brock Purdy? If you would have told me that week 1, I would have been like, really? But so anyway, interesting. We'll see how it all plays out. I really wouldn't be shocked either way, but I think the 49ers should get this game. They should get it done.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's the route that it should go. One thing that I didn't mention when we talked about the Texans or the Ravens, I think I said that the line was like +6.5. It's +9.5. I feel even more comfortable taking that. So at +9.5, I'm even more comfortable there. I don't think it's going to be that much of a blowout. Now, moving on to our third of 4 games this weekend, the Chiefs and the Bills. The Bills find themselves with a home playoff game facing off against the Chiefs, one of their arch nemesises. They haven't been able to get through the Chiefs for many years. It's been difficult. I think that this is going to be a tough game for the Bills overall. I think that they should have – that game against the Steelers should have been much wider than it was. That was far too close for a Steelers team that didn't deserve to be in the playoffs. So I think that the Bills struggled a little bit. However, the Chiefs have had their struggles, and I felt like that while they played well and they won, against the Dolphins, they didn't earn their mojo back like they could have. Like I feel like the Lions did and stuff like that. They didn't earn that back. It wasn't there. So I think that they're still going to struggle in this. It's going to be an uphill battle no matter what for the Chiefs in this game to get through the Bills in their home stadium for sure. But I think like right now the Bills are considered favorites. They're at -2.5 favorites right now. So I think that's interesting, especially considering it's a home game. If the Bills can get through this, the opportunity for them to get to the Super Bowl increases greatly. So they got to get through this game. This is, as it has been for the last few years, like a mini Super Bowl for them. They got to get through it. They have it at home. They're not in Arrowhead. Everything's leaning towards the Bills. If I had to take a pick in this game, I'm picking Chiefs. Freddie, go ahead.
Oh, man. Yeah, I think this comes back to what I want to rant on a little bit more in depth in our sort of random NFL segment where we're talking about the Bears and all that. But we're not going to see good football in this game. The question is, who's going to fall apart more? Is Mahomes going to put the ball where it needs to be? If he does, how many drops are we going to see, including from Travis Kelce? Not to mention, I don't even want to think about those receivers. It is awful. And then go to play calling. The Chiefs, I don't trust them to call the right game plan to take advantage and attack those linebackers as they should. So that's going to be really interesting from their side. And then on the Bills side, like I said, they didn't open up Josh Allen against the Steelers, and we didn't see the Bills get their mojo back against the Steelers, as you said. And I don't think we're going to see good football. I think we're going to see multiple interceptions from Josh Allen. We're going to see multiple drops from the Chiefs. We might see some fumbles. We're going to see a bunch of sacks. We're going to see people running for their lives, and it's going to be like a 23-21 game that we're just like, ugh. And it's not going to be fun to watch in that we saw good football. It's going to be fun to watch in that we're seeing both teams fall apart, and it's a race towards the bottom. And we're curious who is going to stay, who's going to tread water longer. And that's what I see for this game. Jack, what do you have?
Yeah, I'm all Bills here. I actually agree with 100% with what you said. I think it is going to be an ugly game. And I think the line is set perfectly at -2.5. I've got the Bills by a field goal in this game, like I mentioned a little bit earlier. But I just think they've got their number this year. I don't think that I know we haven't seen a Kansas City team fall apart like this in these years past that we've seen. This year, I just think the Bills got their number. I think it is going to be an ugly game, but I just don't see them overcoming those deficiencies that Kansas City has on offense. So I think the Bills win this one in an ugly squeaker.
Yeah, I think that I kind of agree with you guys on the ugly game part. I think that the moment that the NFL decided that this was going to be the game on CBS and this was the game that Jim and Tony were going to call, this was immediately like, it's a 24-21 game. If this game could have been on NBC, maybe we're looking like a 31-34 game. But for whatever reason, just when it's Jim and Tony, this game goes the same way every time. Every time. And the Chiefs are going to have an opportunity at the end. They're going to score a touchdown. And then the Bills are going to have an opportunity right after that. They're going to score a touchdown. And then the Chiefs are still going to have enough time, and they're going to score. It's just going to go the same way it does. It is deja vu. I'm so sick of it. And I'm also sick of the NFL. Why would you schedule this game at 6:30 Eastern? Congratulations, East Coasters. But I like to watch my games late into the night. I like when you guys have to stay up late. So that sucks. But that's okay. That's okay. Moving on to Freddie, you got a point? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, speaking of someone being the Monica to another person's Bill, Tony Romo loves Patrick Mahomes way more than Brittany Lynn or whatever his wife's name is, way more than Taylor Swift loves Travis Kelce. That's the true love story to track in this playoff. And I hate Tony Romo. I hate that they have the Super Bowl this year. And I'm glad that we will be streaming it with the sound off. And that's all I wanted to say.
Hey, I mean, that's fair enough. I think that, like, for me, right, I try to take my bias out of everything, but I know, like, if I was calling games, like, I'm a big Joe Burrow supporter. I'd probably, talk a little bit more highly about Joe Burrow than I would Jordan Love for reasons unbeknownst to, I mean, I'm just saying, you get the point. Moving on, though, we're going to go ahead and move on to the final game that we're looking forward to this weekend. This one being the Sunday afternoon game, Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Detroit Lions. The Lions, as I said, they get a second home playoff game. This one huge, as they are one of the toughest places to play right now. The line right now sits at -6.5, so the Lions are big favorites in this game. However, I do think the Buccaneers have a very strong chance. I love the Buccaneers roster, and I have to give them their credit because earlier in the season, when I did my predictions, my season-long predictions, I went through every single game on the schedule and picked winners and losers, and then took a look at everything that I had picked. And I had the Buccaneers at like 5-12. And I have to give them a lot of credit. Not only did they go out, they won their division, but they won a playoff game against, an Eagles team that on paper is good. So this is a big achievement for them to even get to this point. And I think that they're going to go as far as Baker Mayfield takes them. If Baker Mayfield is able to perform and have one of those games that he's been consistently having over the last few weeks, then the Buccaneers are going to be in this game, and they're more than likely going to be within 6 points towards the end. But like I said earlier, I think that this is a really big game for the Lions. I think that home field advantage, it almost gives them like a 2-point advantage, in my opinion. Like, it helps them so much with how loud it is in there. It's one of the best environments. Having the dome over it helps as well, because not only are we getting good weather, so we get good football in that sense, which I love weather in football games, but it's also good to have that mix with the Lions and have a good football game where it's nice and cleaned up in there, but the sound is contained in there. It's loud in there. It's going to be difficult. Jack, you mentioned it. The Rams had to call 2 timeouts towards the end. At some point, the Bucs are going to have to fold, and I think that that's going to come late in the game. There may be an opportunity where Baker has to be a hero. Maybe it's too loud in that stadium and he can't do it. Something happens, but I think that this is the Lions game. I think that this is their opportunity to advance to the NFC Championship. I think they're going to get it done. However, Bucs plus 6.5, I mean, I'm not against it. Am I going to take it? No. But am I against it? No. Freddie, go right ahead.
Yeah, so I see this game a little different, but I'm sort of going to reiterate points that I've been railing through the entire season. And that is, one, we have not seen consistent play from any unit from the Lions. And so this game, instead of coming down to Baker and Jared Goff, and I'll get to that in a second, it's going to come down to the trenches. At least mostly, it's going to come down to the trenches. Is the Lions D-line going to do a good job and pressure Baker? And are they going to be able to protect Jared Goff? They may not. We've seen inconsistent play on both sides for the Lions. And then coming to the quarterback conversation. So yes, Baker's going to Baker, right? That's the best way to say it. Although he has been a little bit more consistent within games, even when he's inconsistent, he's kind of like Jared Goff is actually like the perfect comp in that Jared Goff has been underratedly bad this year. He has had games where he's thrown horrible interceptions. He's just not seeing the field properly. And against the Rams, he had one of his better games. And so people are kind of like, that's not even in the news right now. But Jared Goff could easily throw 2 picks in this game. And that could mean that even if Baker doesn't have one of his better games, they're in this thing. And so if the Bucs win in the trenches, I'm not trusting any unit on the Lions to actually do their job throughout the entire game. And so Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Trey Palmer, that dude Montgomery that came out of nowhere, Cade Otton, as you mentioned, the leading receiver to attack those Lions linebackers. I'm not counting the Bucs out. I like the plus 6.5. And so I actually think the Bucs have a great chance of winning this game. But we can maybe come back to that if we do a betting section on this. We kind of already have touched on betting as we've gone through this. But Jack, what are your thoughts for Bucs Lions?
I'm going to echo what I said earlier is that I am not freaking touching this game. And that's because kind of what you guys said, it really could kind of go either way here. Like based on their performances this year, I actually think I like the Bucks to win this game. But that home field advantage is so huge in Detroit. It really can absolutely change the game. And like Mason said, it's almost like giving them an extra 2 points. I'm going to say almost the exact same thing I said about the Ravens and the Niners. It depends what squad shows up because we have seen really poor games earlier this year from the Lions, and we've seen some great games where they end up winning it in a clutch fashion. So I am not touching this game with a 10-foot pole, but I think this is going to be a close one, and this is for sure, in my opinion, going to be the best game of the week.
Okay, I like that call. Best game of the week call. I do like that. Freddie, any extra points to add on here?
I could see that being the best game of the week. I think it has a chance for being the best coached game of the week. I think Todd Bowles is the best remaining coach in the playoffs right now, even though we can talk about Kyle Shanahan and stuff. But at the end of the day, a good coach gets good play from his players on a consistent basis. And we can speak about Harbaugh later. But anyway, that's all I'm going to say. I think it definitely has a great chance of being the best game of the week.
Absolutely. And I like what you said about being the best coached game because it actually helps segment us into what we're going to be talking about next. Jack, you are up, my friend. What are you going to be talking about today?
Yeah, man. So we've got a little bit of coaching carousel news in the NCAA. I will try and keep this short and sweet because we are running a little long on time. So the first big news that we've got, like we broke the news last week that Nick Saban was retiring. Well, Kalen DeBoer has been named the new head coach of the University of Alabama. DeBoer, of course, just led the Washington Huskies to the NCAA championship where they fell to the Michigan Wolverines. DeBoer has a combined record as a head coach of 104-12. He has 3 national championships at the NAIA level. He's had quite a bit of success at the FBS level as well. Some people were a little surprised here that it wasn't a member of Saban's coaching tree like Lane Kiffin. Others say that he was the best coach available, so he got grabbed. Mason, love to hear your thoughts on this hiring of DeBoer.
Well, I think DeBoer did Washington dirty, first off, but at the same time, I think that, you have to look at, I think that my big thing is, I think that he had a perfect opportunity. Washington could have won a natty at some point now that Bama's gone, things are kind of more wide open, or not Bama, but Saban's gone. Things are more wide open. So there was that opportunity. And so now here, do you want the opportunity to win a national title and have, I feel like more of an opportunity with Washington and because a lot of players are going to leave Bama with the coaching change and everything like that. Things are not, it's going to take Bama some time. You're going in, you're going to have to, build that change the culture a little bit, try and build upon what Nick Saban had. There's a lot you have to do. There's big shoes you have to fill. I mean, I'm getting anxiety just talking about it. So I don't know why this was such a, I get why he'd want to do this, but at the same time, I don't think it's the right move. I think that if anything, he must have felt that the Washington roster was going to have to go through a rebuild over the next couple of years, and they weren't going to be that competitive team that they were the last couple of years. So I think that, look, it's I don't like the move for him. I think he's got big shoes to fill, and I think he's going to struggle to fill them. But, Bama's going to do what they feel is right. This may end up working out in the end. And, who knows? Maybe we learn Bama's Bama, and it's not Saban. But I think it's Saban. And I think Bama's going to struggle. They're going to be, fringe top 20 sort of, for the next few years. I think that's kind of where Bama lies. But, hey, I may have to eat my words. We'll have to see.
Man, I would love that if Bama was no longer, top 5 every single year. We'll see how it plays out. You made some really great points. It was an interesting move from DeBoer because he was kind of the man at Washington. You kind of you could do whatever you wanted. He had his own offensive coordinator that he brought with him with Ryan Grubb, and they worked together really, really well. I'll actually get into that a little bit more because he will be following DeBoer to Alabama. Interesting aspect there. But huge shoes to fill. I think the big thing here is the talent level that he's going to get at Alabama is just not really comparable to the talent that he was getting at Washington. While you could say, they've had some great receivers over the years. Absolutely. Alabama's had some great everything over the years. Okay. They're always top 5 in recruiting classes. So I can understand why he would want to go there. Now, the big thing he's getting an extra $1 million a year in the contract. So I think that kind of speaks for itself. Is an extra $1 million is nothing to sneeze at, and so I absolutely understand why he made the call. One last thought on DeBoer. So 3 years ago, DeBoer was the head coach for Fresno State University, and he is now the head coach for arguably the most coveted head coaching job in all of the NCAA, or at least one of the most elite jobs in the NCAA. So just really hats off to Kalen DeBoer, man. What a really interesting career trajectory to go from coaching at Fresno State to coaching at Alabama in 3 years. Incredibly impressive. Moving on, we're going to be heading back to Seattle because someone has to backfill that position that Kalen DeBoer just left, and that would be Jedd Fisch out of Arizona. I know that was going to hurt you, Mace, and I was really looking forward to having this conversation. We have been high on Jedd Fisch all year, talked about how he really had kind of that historic turnaround for Arizona, and over the past 3 seasons, he's really been kind of largely responsible for their success. Fisch has just signed a 7-year deal with Washington worth $7.75 million, which is effectively doubling his salary from Arizona. Mason, dying to hear your thoughts, man.
Look, I get the money aspect of it, but this is not. I said DeBoer did Washington dirty. Well, Fisch is doing Arizona even dirtier. I mean, this is. I said it a few weeks ago on the show. I was very high on U of A and what they were able to accomplish and everything like that, and what they've been able to build in that program that struggled for years at the start of this decade. So, or not at the start of this decade, but towards the end of last decade. So, this is such a just wow move. I think that you look at it and it's just, the money it's what's driving him to them. But I think that it puts a lot of pressure on U of A right now because they have a good roster. They have something special that's building there. Now they have to get the right coach. And I think that this move tells me Fisch wasn't the right guy. You don't want to be a part of what they're doing. Fine, get out. Go be at Washington. Go to the bigger school. Don't give a shit. I think Arizona's going to find a guy that they're going to love even more. I think that right now, ASU is kind of at that point where they have a coach, Kenny Dillingham, who, while they didn't have a great season, there's a lot of promise in that ASU team right now. They look like U of A did a couple of years ago. So they're hoping that they can have a similar kind of success story. But I think that U of A, this coaching hire for them, it's the most important thing right now, because if they can get it right, this is going to be one of the better teams in the NCAA for the next few years. If they get it wrong, U of A is going to go right back to irrelevancy, and it's just everything's going to go back to normal. But this is a huge coaching hire. They had a great opportunity to be great with Fisch. Fisch just threw that all away, and now it's up to them in order to pick up the pieces and hopefully have a successful season next year.
Mason, you hit the nail on the head, man. I don't think that I could have said it any better myself. They're really at a crossroads right now for their program. You either put the money up and you get a big name coach that knows what they're doing, or you don't. Maybe you move up someone internally, or maybe you get a second tier guy and you kind of basically accept irrelevancy. A lot of these way too early preseason polls are putting Arizona in top 10. And that was with Jedd Fisch. Now, who knows where they'll be. But so to your point, really depends on who they hire as a coach. Also, I think it really depends on how many of those Arizona players take off and follow Fisch to Washington once that transfer portal opens back up. So we'll kind of see how it all plays out. But really, this is a big moment for Arizona. You can either make your program cement your program as nationally relevant for the time being, or you can accept relegation to being not a top 20 program anymore. And that's really up to you if you want to spend the money or not. So
absolutely. And can I make one last point? I think I want to say that, coaching carousel moves fast, but I feel like with the way that, all the moves with DeBoer going to Alabama and then Fisch going, the fact that this was just sprung on U of A sucks so bad, considering the fact that there's no way this has not been talked about for a little while. There's no way that they didn't mention this, this has been talked about. So the fact that it was such a surprise sucks. I'm curious to see whether or not that actually turns a lot of the players off from moving with Fisch. And I wouldn't be surprised. Basically, I think what's going to happen is I think a lot of those players that like maybe you're fringe on like whether or not they want to leave now. They may wait to see that coaching hire. Hence why that coaching hire is so important. Is I think a lot of those guys with the way Fish went out, he did not solidify bringing those guys with him. So now those guys are going to want to see who comes in before they make that decision to go be with Fish, because I feel like a lot of them are going to feel wronged in the end.
Great point, Mason. And, you touched on it there a moment, is that when he left, Fish didn't really make like an impassioned plea for, Arizona players to follow him, which is something that DeBoer did do. He made kind of we're building something, basically hinted very, very strongly at follow me to Alabama to his Washington players. And I think a lot of them are going to, particularly because it has just been announced earlier today that Ryan Grubb is going to be following him to Alabama. Now, this is a really, really interesting kind of turn of events, because originally it was announced that Ryan Grubb was actually going to be applying for that head coaching job at Washington. He was denied that job, did not get the offer, and he basically turned around and said, screw you, Washington, I'm going to Alabama. Not a huge surprise, because like I said, Grubb and DeBoer have worked together for a decade, because he was with him over at Fresno State. He followed him, all the way up. He was actually with him at South Dakota too, I think. But either way, interesting here, because Tommy Rees hasn't been officially fired as the offensive coordinator at Alabama. So when he brought on Ryan Grubb, I believe the title was technically associate offensive coordinator and quarterback coach, right? Well, here's the thing. We know Ryan Grubb is a great offensive coordinator, one of the best in the country. Tommy Rees is out of a job as far as I'm concerned. So I think that Grubb comes in there, they're going to kick Tommy Rees out, and then where does Tommy Rees land? So kind of some interesting stuff going on there, something to keep an eye on. Okay, moving on to our next piece in the coaching carousel news. Jim Harbaugh has met with the Chargers on Monday, as well as the Falcons midweek. It seems that this all but cements Harbaugh going the NFL route. I'm expecting that we'll get an announcement before the end of the month, but very unlikely that he's going to be returning to Michigan, which will, of course, send another atomic bomb throughout the NCAA coaching carousel. But I've spoken pretty extensively about how I see Harbaugh fitting in really well at the Chargers. Would love to hear what your guys' thoughts are if you see him fitting in at either a better team, if you agree on the Chargers. Where do you think Jim Harbaugh should land?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with, look, the Chargers have a great roster, horribly mismanaged, and you can't go wrong with going to the Chargers. The only downside is LA. And, just like he's going to lose like 70% of his salary or some crazy number due to taxes. Like I that's the only downside. I mean, you got Justin Herbert, you got a competent offensive line. Maybe you want to get better there, but they're competent. You got talent throughout your defense. You maybe want to get a little bit more young talent at the receiver, but with one draft and free agency, you're good to go with the Chargers. So, look, you can't go wrong there. I don't think he's going to Atlanta. They still have probably another 2 years before they can really compete, and the Chargers can compete like this season. I mentioned the Raiders as a fun landing spot for any coach, and their roster isn't horrible either. They need to address a couple things, but look, him to the Chargers, neither side loses there.
Mason, love to hear your thoughts, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair enough what Freddy said about him going to the Chargers. I think that is probably one of the better destinations. I don't think it should be discounted that the Falcons do have a solid roster that Arthur Smith just didn't know how to use. So, look, man, I like Jim Harbaugh going to the Falcons, but I think the Chargers is a better fit for him. I'd like to make it known, though, that I think the fact that Michigan included in his next contract extension that he couldn't look for NFL offers, this has made it so this was going to happen either way. I think that they kind of forced his hand to where he feels the need to at least just test the waters, see what's out there, because now he has to make a decision. He's going to get locked up for 10 years. He is now forced to make that decision whether or not he wants to leave. And I think to Jack's point, he may really want to. He's got a national title now, so that makes that choice a lot easier. And, it's one of those things where he talked about he can sit at the big boy table now with his family now that he's won a national title. And, his brother's got a Super Bowl and his dad has a national title. And I think that the ability to go out and say, yeah, well, I have a national title and a Super Bowl against his brother would be even greater. And that's an opportunity for him to take advantage there. So I think that for him, you got to look at that and think that he gets a Super Bowl. He's accomplished the two biggest feats in football. That's a national championship in college and a Super Bowl in the NFL. I think he's going to go and join a really solid team, that being the Chargers. Jack, back to you.
Yeah, great points, Mason. Now, a couple more interesting things about the Harbaugh decision that he's going to be making. It's being reported that so far the conflict that he's had with Michigan's contract has nothing to do with money. They're giving him as much money as he wants, but they're refusing to write into the contract stipulations that would protect him from sanctions. This is what I've heard. This is what's being reported, that he's not getting that protection that he would want from Michigan to protect him from the NCAA, protect his money, make sure that he's still on the field. So I don't see any way that he doesn't go to the NFL, and I'm expecting that decision probably within the month. So, just like keep your eyes on the news. I think it's going to be coming out soon. So, really, really big story that would come out of Harbaugh leaving Michigan. All right, guys, I think we are at that point in the segment. Excuse me. We are at that point in the show. It's time to get into bets.
I think we have one more before bets.
Oh, you're right. Excuse me, Freddy. We had talked earlier about how we were going to have a couple of NFL tidbits. Let's go ahead and get into those before we move on. Freddy, why don't you go ahead, buddy?
Yeah, and sorry to disappoint any Bears fans out there or any Bears haters out there who wanted to hear us talk about how bad the Bears currently are and their interesting situation. But I just got evident reactions from two Bears fans. But we just want to quickly mention that the NFL is in talks with ESPN for an equity deal. So them owning some, sports media is extremely interesting. And obviously ESPN would still cover other sports, and they would still have other sources of revenue. But the NFL actually owning a part of the sports media world and having a say in what gets published. And that'll be interesting, right? Like if you just think back to like, what's the concussion conversation going to look like? What's the suspension conversation going to look like around different things if the primary source of information for a lot of people is ESPN, which is owned by the NFL? So they're in talks. It's early stages. They are progressing, but it's early stages. And then that's interesting for what they're going to do streaming wise, because if ESPN is, if that's still cable, still classical TV, well, we saw the Peacock deal, 23 million people watch that. By the way, I have to give a shout out. I'm pulling a lot of these numbers from the PBD podcast, Valuetainment. So shout out to them. But 23 million people watch this on Peacock. Peacock got a bunch of new subscribers out of this, which, that's subscriptions. That's every month. That's money. So people are going to be paying money, and then it becomes even more interesting with Amazon and how you can just buy things. You can buy, Tyreek Hill scored a touchdown. Buy a Tyreek Hill jersey. You already have your credit card. Just hit yes, and it's yours. It'll be there tonight. And so, that's going to be really interesting. And they're going to be able to outbid everybody and just have all the streaming. Is the NFL going to keep an open market for no real reason, instead of just chasing the ultimate money? So this is all going to be very interesting to watch, just in terms of how you're going to be watching football in 5 years. So that's all I wanted to mention, something to keep an eye on. And now we'll be moving on to our locks of the week.
All right, man. Really looking forward to getting into the locks of the week. So just to recap, we're on a pretty good hot streak right now. I am 3-0. Freddy lost only on his one pick for the Browns. He had a big swing, but it happens, buddy. And then Mason is also 3-0 himself. So, I'd like to just go ahead and say that before we get going, that if you're trying to make some money, you might want to tail these picks. Now, I will get into my lock of the week right now. I cashed on the Njoku over 55.5 last week. That actually cashed really heavily. He got over 80. I think he had 90. My pick for lock of the week this week is going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown over 89.5. Now, you guys might be hearing that line and thinking it's a little high for receiving yards. And that was my first thought as well. But he's gone over that in 5 straight. And he's gone over that in 12 out of 17 games this year. The last time he played Tampa Bay, he went for 124. So I'm confident that he'll get the job done over 89.5. I'm looking for Amon-Ra St. Brown to have a really good game. And so I think he gets that pretty easily. That is my lock of the week. Amon-Ra St. Brown over 89.5. Freddie, let's hear yours, buddy.
Yeah, first I gotta say, the Browns, I was wrong, and that did contribute a tiny bit of anger when I was going through the Browns Texans game. Now there was a ton of analysis in there looking at Ronnie Hickman and Joe Flacco, and that's all calmed down a little bit on CJ Stroud. He did his job, so all that was still accurate. Though I was a little bit mad because I did pick the Browns to beat the Texans. That said, I'm going to come way down this week and give me McCaffrey to score against the Packers, dude. McCaffrey to score against anyone is a fantastic bet. You can't lose. So that's kind of just wimping out, but I'm gonna own that, and give me McCaffrey to score.
I want to check the odds on that really quickly, just to see how much you're gonna have to put down to make some money.
If it's minus 200, I'll change it.
It's minus 340.
Well, look. Vegas knows what's up. They obviously listen to this podcast before we put it out. So, all right. You know what? Give me Deebo Samuel to score then. Give me
That's
Deebo.
Good. That's plus 105.
All right. We'll take that. Give me Deebo to score against the Packers. That's my lock of the week.
That's a great pick.
What about you?
I like the Debo pick. Now for me, I mentioned it a little bit earlier in the show, but I'm liking the Texans plus 9.5. Last week we got the dub on the under for that Texans Eagles. What in the hell? For that Bucks Eagles game, excuse me. And we barely hit that. It was under 44.5. I think that game finished with 41 total. So we were able to hit that very nicely. Move us along to 3-0 this week. Texans 9.5. I mean, I like it a lot. I said it earlier in the show that I liked it when it was plus 6.5, or at least when I thought it was plus 6.5. So the fact that this is plus 9.5 makes me like it even more. You could take the over in this game as well, but you're going to get a little bit better odds with the Texans on the spread. I like the Texans on that plus 9.5. I think that they're going to at least be within a touchdown. But like I said earlier in the show, 32-29 is my pick for this game. Give me that Texans plus 9.5 to move me to 4-0.
All right. So if you want to parlay it, obviously McCaffrey touchdown. That's Vegas. That's Vegas's lock of the week. And then we got Texans plus 9.5, and we got Amon-Ra on the over on yards, and we got Deebo to score a tutty. I'm guessing that parlay would put us at about 9-1. That's my guess. Jack, it looks like
right now. Yep.
Jack's
1 second, buddy.
doing some calculations for you, but the odds might change a little bit. So either way,
dude, really good math. It's plus 900
on the nose.
On the nose, plus 900. Can you see this? Hold on.
Well, look, I guesstimated it based off of experience, but I guess I am a pro bettor. So, all right. A little fuzzy, but look, the numbers might change a little bit. We hit it on the nose. We're goated. All of us, we're all going to go. Well, Jack and Mason will be 4-0. I will be 3-1. And you will be 9 times richer than when you started the week. So that's our lock of the weeks. Locks of the week. Jack, bring us home.
Freddy, how the hell did you just do that? That was one of the most impressive things I've seen in a really long time. All right, guys. Wow. Go ahead and tail those picks because, I think we just demonstrated how much we know ball, baby. Thanks again for joining us this week on another episode of Film Facts Stats. Again, this podcast is brought to you by Back Sports Page. You can listen to us on all major streaming platforms. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can also see us on YouTube. Thanks again for joining us, guys. We'll see you next week.